committee weeks, it adds up to about maybe 4 months total. The other 8 months we're in the community, and we have to work and live amongst the laws that we pass. Congress should get a hold of that. And I know Francis Rudy's on board, so that's the direction we need to head. But Florida does it right. So that's what I do, and that's frankly why I was late trying to get some real estate stuff done, and I apologize for that. But yes, I mean, I can tell you I've got a client that is looking to buy a lot of land, and we've been doing the due diligence. Commercial real estate takes a while, since February, and now that this issue's cropped up, they're now wanting to lower the offer that they're intending to submit. So that does affect prices, there's no question about it. On the other hand, I can tell you that someone, I don't do residential, but referred it to my sister, they said, hey, I see what's going on down there. Looks like an excellent time to buy. I'm sure sellers are eager to lower their price and sell something. So, you know, you're looking at two different ends. While I know that our economy is resilient, we've survived a recession, we've survived hurricanes, we cannot let this continue to exist. My hope, and I'm always the eternal optimist, is that we will solve this problem, and we have the things in place to do so. People will continue to look to Southwest Florida as a beautiful place to live and thrive. And yes, the realities are people are looking to lowball offers, and property values can be affected, but let's continue to push forward and make sure that we are doing everything we can to keep that stable, and that at least the transactions continue to come forward.
To Dane's first point about legislature, Senator Mike Bennett, who used to be a state senator, had a sign in his office that said, "No one's life, liberty, or property is safe when the legislature is in session." And so the less we have of it, the better, probably, at all levels. Congressman Rooney was down yesterday, and we started out at the Herbert Hoover Dike with Mario Diaz-Balart, another congressman who's on the Appropriations Committee, and we talked about the funding we got there. But then after that, we came into Fort Myers Beach, had a work session with Chamber of Commerce leaders. Chris from the Realtors was there, hotel representatives, restaurant representatives, fishing captains were there. So it was important for, not us, because we know the story, and Congressman Rooney's on top of it, we know what's going on in our community, but we brought down representatives from the Department of Interior, the EPA, the Fish and Wildlife Association, many different organizations in Washington that maybe don't know the story, the personal story. They may see the numbers in the big national picture, but they don't get to hear those personal stories from people directly affected. And our hope is that now we will be able to go back to Washington and discuss with them the ways they can provide immediate help in terms of how we help people who are losing income, who are losing business. One person talked about their restaurant, the waitresses who made $10 and $11 in tips for 2 days, when normally that's a few $100s. So this has a real impact on people, a direct impact, not just on real estate sales, but on everybody who works in Southwest Florida, really. So we're doing our best to impress upon the agencies that can provide some help at the federal level to do it immediately.
The thing to understand is we're still in recovery mode from the downturn. Things look better, but we're still not there yet. Give you, for instance, Cape Coral is second in the country for recovery of home prices. The home prices are up 173%, but that's from the bottom of the downturn. When you talk about home prices prior to that, it's a much different number, because there's people who still haven't gotten back up to where their housing value was before the downturn, and maybe never will, because that, some of that was a bit artificial. But it's still, when you sit there and you look at the numbers, you say, that's great, housing values are up 173%, but we're still not there yet. And now with something like this, as I said earlier, we have a pretty fragile ecosystem. So, when you throw in this type of impact, it's gonna put the brakes on the housing, and Dane and I were talking, even the commercial aspect is gonna get impacted. You just mentioned you had a client, they want to reduce the offer on the land because of the stuff going on. It's a situation where we have to show them that we're working towards a solution, and it's hopefully going to be a solution that keeps us from reliving this every year or two because we can't keep taking these hits. We need a constant flowing economy to continue the growth, especially in the Cape. We've gotten stronger here because we've got a larger base. On the commercial side, people are going over the bridges less now to go shopping. They're doing a lot more of it here. We want to keep that going, but something like this will impact it. The other thing that we have here is we have a lot of very small businesses. We have a lot of small businesses in the Cape, and they're the most fragile. They just set up the bridge loan that's available to businesses. Unfortunately, you have to have 2 or more employees, and there's a lot of businesses in the Cape that don't fit that. Charter boats, a lot of times it's just the captain. You know, there's a lot of businesses that are very small. You know, electricians, plumbers. Sometimes it's just them and their truck. So these things start to add up. So, you know, we need to make sure that we show everyone, including the people who aren't here yet, who want to come here, that we're working towards a solution and we're going to get a handle on this. And it's okay to come here because things are going to get better.
I think they were making up for me wandering off topic there at the start. But I'll tell you what, I'll give you a very simple way. When we're in, everybody at the city and county level working on their budgets, and I'm going through what our exposure is for public safety reasons for getting rid of 310 tons of fish off the beaches of Sanibel, and that's $800,000 spent in 10 days.
Well,
That's $800,000 in 10 days spent. Average $74,000 a day
just
to pick up the fish. That is such a fat hole in a budget. It's insane.
Where's it going? That's the big question. Where are they taking the sea life, the dead sea life?
The sea life, some of them are being buried, some of them are being taken out to landfills, and others are being used for study purposes to see what sort of migrations. One of the things that I'd asked to do is, when we do the burying of fish, it'd be a good opportunity to see what sort of lateral movement you have in our aquifers, because that's applicable to anything. And it might as well double dip on the disaster and get some good information out of it. But when you're talking about that many nutrients, and one of the great problems about dealing with, you could poison algae or whatever, but the problem is all you do is release the nutrients back into the water, and the next thing comes along and has an unnatural amount of nutrients, and it blooms. So you've really got to solve the problem at the start or remove them entirely from it. And that's the only way. But listen, the things that I was trying to work in for the citizens on Sanibel that really matter to them, and now I've got to say, just cut these other things to make this work out, and now we dropped 800 grand on dead fish.
Do you think it's good though that they're burying?
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
The fish that are getting buried are going into the landfills that have liners that are appropriately established for that. Moat Marine is very specific about this. You don't want to put these carcasses just anywhere. So, and there's probably a high degree of possibility they're getting incinerated here because we have a waste-to-energy plant in Lee County. Here, Mr. Berardi, quick question for you, just to kind of, because you alluded to this in your intro, just confirming we know SERP and SEP signed into law back in the early 2000s. Can you just kind of go back to that about appropriations versus what was signed into, and why has this been an issue that has been drug out since SERP and SEP were signed?
Yeah, sure. Liken it to maybe as far as the authorization versus appropriations part, kind of liken it to someone going for a home and being pre-approved for a mortgage. They haven't been given the money, they've been told they can have it, but it's not until you go get the mortgage that you got the money. And it's the same with authorization versus appropriations. Just because a project's been authorized doesn't mean it's paid for, and you can't build it unless it's been paid for. So these projects were authorized starting back in 2000 for SERP, which is a comprehensive Everglades restoration plan, and that is 68 projects designed to move water south and reduce the need for discharges into the river east and west, the St. Lucie River and the Caloosahatchee River, which would be a big solution for our problems. And it would also help the Everglades to get the water and nutrients it needs to survive. So up until the last year, these projects had gotten, I'd say, token funding over the last 18 years. A couple million here or there, 10 or 20 million, which in government terms is, at the federal government level, when you look at the federal government budget, that really isn't a lot, and it really isn't but a little dent in what we need down here to get these projects built. When Congressman Rooney came in, one of the first things he did was start talking to people who, the first thing he did was got every congressman in Florida, all 27 representatives, both parties, to sign a letter that went to the president that said, this is a priority for our state. We need help. We need these projects built because water is the lifeblood of our economy and our ecology. And if we don't get it fixed, Florida's going to be a mess. So that was step one. Then he started to bring people down. We brought down Ken Calvert, who is a subcommittee chair that deals with appropriations. Simpson is another representative who is a subcommittee chair on appropriations. He built a good relationship with Mario Diaz-Balart, who's congressman in Miami, who's on appropriations committee. Brought down Kevin McCarthy, who's the majority leader in the House, to see the area. We compete with other states, obviously, for resources and dollars, and if you're just someone from outside the area, you may not know the importance of the Everglades, or of our water projects, or of Lake Okeechobee, and how that affects billions of dollars in our economy. So bringing them down, letting them see it firsthand, getting them on a helicopter with South Florida Water Management District and touring the area has gone a long way to getting us money appropriated. The first part of that was getting money for the dike to be reinforced. That's kind of a lead project. This year we had appropriated $514 million, which is enough to fix the dike and speed it up so that it'll be complete in 2022 instead of sometimes towards the end of that decade. It's a huge first step, and in addition to that, we were able to get $115 million for the SERP projects budgeted, which is the most we've ever had outside of the Obama stimulus year of 2010. In the entire time these projects have been built, we've never had that much money budgeted. And we're already working towards next year, and this will allow things like the reservoir south of the lake to be started, and the dike to be finished, and some other projects to be completed along the way, and we'll be on our way. The drawback, of course, is that all of this takes time. As you heard, the dike 2022 is expedited, and that's as fast as the Army Corps can build it. It's not a great, it doesn't answer how do we fix this today, but it answers how we fix it permanently.
If you don't mind, I'll touch on that, because it's the state-federal partnership, and everything he said is accurate. And as he said, back in 2000, this was signed into law, SERP. And if you look on the tables, I put out maps here, and that kind of highlights the projects that we've been working on. In 2000, the governor was Jeb Bush, the president was Bill Clinton. That was signed into law in a bipartisan manner. They realized the Everglades is an important part of history, it's an important part of our world. There's no other Everglades in the world. We need to preserve it, we need to move forward. So that was signed into law, and the plan was we're going to do 50-50 share and get these projects done. Well, we deal with a federal government that doesn't always agree, and we dealt with the recession here in the state of Florida. So we have so far funded, I think the number is around $3.5 billion towards these projects. 2/3 of that is state, 1/3 of that is federal. And as he said, the feds are now finally stepping up the pace, thanks to Congressman Rooney, and frankly, thanks to you, thanks to the voices back home. Also part of the issue that we have been dealing with is it's been kind of the silent threat that's out there. It's okay, we need to fund the Everglades. That sounds boring, let's stick with the Everglades. Well, then you look at 2015, 2016, and now 2018, and you look at what's happening, and people are paying attention. Congressman Rooney is able to go to his colleagues and say, hey, we got to get this fixed. Myself and my colleagues are able to go to our colleagues and say, we've got to get this fixed, and we've been able to do so. So in 2016, if you look at that, that shows all projects that have been sanctioned since 2011 that are completed, those that are planned, and those that are under construction. In 2016, we were able to pass the Legacy Florida Act, and what that does is ensures that at least $200 million every single year from state funds is going towards these projects for the next 20 years. And then we're hoping, of course, the feds continue to match that. In 2017, we were able to pass Senate Bill 10, which has allowed the southern reservoir. And by the way, the entire Panhandle voted against that. So that's what we deal with when we go to Tallahassee. We've got ourselves saying this is important to us, and the Panhandle's like, well, I don't care. What do I got to tell my constituents? I'm fun in the Everglades. It does nothing for me. So those are the things that we're working towards. These are projects that are in play that will help clean, store, and divert the water. And going back to, we talked about the problems and what we're doing. What hasn't been talked about is the why. And the why is 150 years ago when we decided to make Florida a state, we looked at this land and said, we can't do anything, no one can live here, it's hot, there's no AC, there's mosquitoes, and there's Native Americans that want to kill us. So what we'll do is we'll send someone down there, we'll figure out a way to literally drain the swamp, let's make sure that land is fertile, we'll farm it, and then we'll have a place that we can farm for the entire year. And when it's snowing in the winter months, we can have tomatoes and sugar and you name it. So yes, now we have 21 million people here, we have 100 million tourists a year, and this is the result of human runoff. There's no question about it. 21 million people, 100 million visitors, and everything from ag to our fertilizers to city runoff to you name it. This is the problem. And the problem is the water doesn't go where it used to be intended. We've got 6 million people that live in South Florida. We've got agricultural communities that are there too. So what we need to do is make sure that water that's flowing into our lake from the north goes where it's intended, not down our river and not the St. Lucie River. And the way it's intended is south, and that's what that southern reservoir is going to help us do. We also need to find ways to clean that water along the way and stop the problem at its source. So those are the things we're focused on. That's what the map here in front of you shows, and at least you can see tangibly there are things in work that are going to solve this problem once and for all. And like we said, it's not going to happen overnight. But with the constant pressure that we're able to bring to our colleagues in Washington and in Tallahassee, we will get this done.
Thank you. Keep that real quick because you kind of alluded to something we wanted to ask next. And I pose this to you, Councilman, as well, too. In your service in public office, what are you seeing now in the political realm, in the political world, and other elected officials that's different? What's different about our reactions this year and what we're doing now, locally, state, federally, that's different and positive?
I will say that there's nothing that's changed for me differently. Getting the attention of others is certainly something. When I ran in 2012, I ran on the 4 E's of Eagle: economics, education, ethics, and the environment. As a Republican, oh my God, I ran on the environment. That's something important to me and something that I've always strived to make a change for. What's different is how heartbreaking this is to see and to somewhat feel helpless, to know that you're doing everything possible to make changes and convince others that this is something we need to do, convincing others, meaning my colleagues all over the state in Tallahassee, but knowing that we can't fix it by snapping our fingers and waking up tomorrow and knowing the problem's going to go away. That's the most heartbreaking thing. But I would say the difference now, not personally, the difference now is being able to show our colleagues that this is something we need funded now.
Yeah, before I pass it on to Jason, just to add on to that, at the federal level, I think the difference is that for the first time ever, the entire state congressional delegation is aligned and in support of getting these projects done, getting them funded. 27 members, as diverse as from Debbie Wasserman Schultz to Matt Gaetz, all agree that this is a priority for our state and our country, and that's rare to have it for any issue, but we've gotten them all together.
You know, I think at the federal level, one of the things that we have going for us, and this is no disrespect to our prior congressman, but Congressman Rooney is probably the best congressman we've had support us. And he's a true believer when it comes to this, and he knows more about it and these issues than any member of Congress I would suggest, quite frankly. And again, I want to say that the prior congressmen are super fellows to a man. But we have somebody now who gets it and wants to drive and isn't concerned about who's paying for his next election, because he paid for probably half of the people that are in Congress in the first place and got them in there. So we have a freshman. God bless the people in North and Florida, but they're not going to care about us when our economy collapses. They'll look after themselves. And rightly so. We need to look after us. And we need people who are out there working in the community, actually, quote, hang out with the citizens, and can then go up, do their part, and come back, and let the next woman or man step up and do their part. That's the only way anything's going to change in our, quote, neck of the weeds. We have a large amount coming into this for a business that has, into our county, in our district, for a business that has no business here at all. They're not doing that because they really like the people of Florida. Things are getting slow walked, and they need to be expedited, and the only way that's going to happen is if we stay true to our Republican ideals, and I'm talking about small R Republican. I'm a pipe-hitting Republican with a big R, but the first things first is representing your own citizens is the most important thing you can do. And you're not supposed to make money, people. You're supposed to lose so that you come home and go back to your job.
Thank you, sir. Dana, hold on to that for a minute, because you could probably allude to this next question. How has our development over the last, let's say, 20 years? You've been around here that long?
6.5 years.
6.5 years, but you know a lot. In your roles, you've done the research, and you know. How has our development, do you think, impacted our local watershed and what's coming into our river from our local watershed, whether it's septic, whether it's sewer, whether it's treated, untreated, whether any of that kind of stuff, any kind of regards to that, and how is the business community kind of, you know, a part of this?
Well, we have 400 miles of canals for a reason. We had to. Cape Coral's very low. So we created, you know, as talked about earlier, we took Swan plan and you know, developed it into what we have today. Cape Coral's been very mindful about getting out of the local water. You know, we don't pump into the river. The remaining thing is the wells and septics, and we're, you know, the UEP project is expanding, and we're slowly eliminating that as well. Local industry, you know, a lot of it again is hospitality. And we have some larger industries, but they don't, you know, they're not attached to the water per se. A lot of the marine-related businesses are not on water because they're building boats and accessories. So when you look at it from that standpoint, you know, it's Cape Coral's done a good job of getting us out of the river and trying to be a good environmental partner, and they're continuing to do so. So that you know, be mindful of that. But the thing is because of all the canals, we are part of that fragile ecosystem, and we have to make sure that we address it, you know, to stay strong. You know, we were talking about our economy and the small businesses and everything. We're already in a tough bind right now just getting workers. You know, there's a lot of businesses out there that don't have workers, you know, showing up every day. And now, you know, you put this on the news, and that's going to keep people from moving down here to take these jobs. So, you know, we're at a very tough time for business growth and expansion because they can't get a hold of the people who can help them do that. I mean, we're sitting here right now. We have Nortec moving their world headquarters into Cape Coral this year, and they're looking to hire over 100 people. And it's going to be a scramble. It really is, because they're growing fast and they need those people. And that's just one example. We got other businesses that are expanding in our community too, and they're going to need access to some skilled labor. And usually you go up and say, hey, come on down to Florida, it's warm all winter. You know, but when they see this stuff, they have to think twice, because they're moving their families and they're investing in real estate, just like the rest of us. So that gives them pause, it really does. So yeah, you know, we've done a pretty good job, but it doesn't matter, because we're all in this together. Cape Coral, Fort Myers, the East Coast, you know, we're all being impacted by this, and you know, it's something that has to be addressed very quickly, or we're really going to start sliding back the other way, and none of us want that. We can't afford it.
Thank you.
Just for a second.
Yes, sir.
Listen, it's one of those truisms. You can't tell people to clean up their own house while your house is dirty. And all of us at the local level, specifically municipalities, counties, have got to be doing everything that we possibly can. For those who can get off septic, they need to be off septic to stop the leaching. And we're up to, I think, 99.8% of the city and of Sanibel is now on septic. And we're working with Captiva to get them sewers.
Oh, I was going to say.
And I do not work for a septic company, I would like to say. And there's projects that we can do that create jobs as well. The Jordan Marsh, which we just authorized, and we're going to start in 2 weeks, it removes 38% of the phosphorus, or the nitrogen, and 22% of the phosphorus out of the Sanibel River, simply by redirecting it through a marsh that absorbs and locks it and passes out. These are the sort of things, because listen, if you're going to tell somebody else that they're polluting our river, we need to be doing as much as we can, or planning as much as we can to clean our own house. It's just not fair.
I'm just going to say on top of that, I heard someone who's much more intelligent than me speaking on this, and they said, Mother Nature does a hell of a job of cleaning her own areas, but we're not letting her do it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, very well said. All right, so this is kind of a high inside fastball for you baseball fans. So kudos to anybody who can hit this one. Let's talk public health. So we're starting to see stories. Moat Marine laboratory scientists are working, taking water samples down here. There's neurotoxins in red algae, in red tide. There's neurotoxins in blue-green algae in some species. We're seeing some of that here. Is anybody up to date on some of the public health issues and what these studies are saying, and are there connections? Are we concerned about long-term effects on our, the devastation to our marine life is terrible. Are we concerned about long-term effects on human life and quality of life?
I'll go there for
Right.
just a short part.
Yep.
One of the other things we're trying to do, we just brought down, as I said, DEP, the EPA, the Department of Interior, all these different groups. What we're trying to do next is to get the CDC and the National Institute of Health to come down, hopefully have them meet with Lee Health and some of the other organizations down here so that they can assess for themselves what health risk may be there, working with the people in our community who deal with it every day, and hopefully that'll give us better answers on that.
And I'll say, yeah, I mean, do you look at that stuff, do you want to breathe it, do you want to ingest it? No, stay away from it. Don't be in it long periods of time. I mean, that's I think common sense, but obviously while we try to figure out what the scientific ramifications are, be careful, certainly be careful. And one thing we're doing, while it's certainly helping clean up, it's not dealing with the underlying problem, and that's something that we need to look at. But the short term is cleaning up, and we've got crews, we've got through the state of emergency that the Lee County delegation had asked for and the governor issued. We've got crews that are working our canals, that are working our beaches, that are cleaning up and making sure that this stuff is disposed of correctly, as we talked about in Sanibel, and we're seeing in all the canals and along the river. And by the way, this is a double front, as you mentioned. This is red tide, which is somewhat naturally occurring. We've got reports dating back to the 1800s as far as the 1500s, with reports almost as serious as this. Obviously, it's not as documented as we have it today, so we can't compare it, but there are reports that this is a historic event. There's no question that human runoff and human waste exacerbates the issue. We're dealing with stuff that comes, it starts at Sanibel, it starts at Boca Grande, and then you see it going all the way down to Naples. So the question is, and some of the nation's leading scientists are trying to figure it out, is what is really causing this? Where does it start? And one thing is obviously runoff from our state, but we've got the Mississippi River with 15, 20 states that feed into it and goes right into the Gulf. I mean, we have a serious issue where human consumption is causing problems that we are seeing on our beaches. And then we've got the blue-green algae issue. So we're dealing with the double front, no question about it. And that's why this year is so serious, where in some years we're dealing with just the red tide, and I grew up with that. You go to Fort Myers Beach, you smell it, and you move on. But obviously this year is super bad, and then you're seeing it happening with the blue-green algae. So stay away from it, let the work crews do their jobs, and let's figure out the long-term solutions and get this fixed.
Okay, hold on to that mic, Mr. Representative. Let's talk deep well injection, emergency estuary injection wells that have been proposed. South Florida Water Management District is going to start doing some of these wells north of the lake to pump water down into that. And it's at a big expense, somewhere in the tune of $330 million over 10 years to fund and operate these wells year over year, and to drill them and make sure, and to test them and everything like that. Is that a good use of our state dollars? Should that be redirected to other projects in the SERP or in STEP and have more impact there, get those dollars there, so we can have an overall solution sending water south?
Anything that's going to fix the problem is a good use of our state dollars. The question I have is the science behind deep well injections, and I'm doing a lot of research to figure that out. And look, so the issue is we get 90 to 95% of the flow we get comes from the north, not from the south. The problem is it doesn't go south, so we get it east and west. We get the water from the north. So what do we do with this water at the north? How can we divert it the right way, store it, get rid of it, treat it? What can we do to keep this water from coming our way? And we do have the Kissimmee River Basin, which is coming online in 2020. You'll see by the map, which is going to help clean water and store it before it gets to us. And then we have the southern reservoir as well as eastern and western reservoirs. We have that stuff in place. It's going to take time. Deep well injections, the benefits, we can do it more quickly. It won't cost as much as some other areas. The cons, where's the water going? Is it scientifically backed? These are things that I'm looking at. If we can do it smartly, if it's scientifically feasible, let's do it. That's my take on it, but let's do the research and make sure it's done safely and right, and we know for a fact what's happening. It's being done by our cities and counties now. They inject wastewater down, and it goes out to the ocean. That water's going there anyways, and it's coming through us to get there. If it can bypass us and do it in a safe manner, I'm all for it, but I'm not signing on to it until I can get the research and shows that it's the right thing to do.
Thank you, sir.
I'd like to hear the councilman's take on this, because this is one of the most undocumented and dangerous processes that we know to man. Plus, it starves the Everglades of the fresh water it so desperately needs.
Councilman?
Also, it's going right into our aquifers, underneath our aquifers in Florida. If that gets into our fresh water, then human life
She's talking about the
really
aquifers.
going to be affected. We won't have.
That's a very valid concern. Yeah, absolutely. No, deep well injection goes in the boulder zone below the aquifer, but obviously the integrity of these wells, and that's, I think, to the representative's point, the integrity of the wells and the testing, once these things, the first 2 test wells, I think South Florida Water Management District is getting ready to start north of the lake, northwest of the lake. So we're going to see some of that testing. Councilman?
You know, that's one of those questions you'd rather not be asked. And I'm the furthest thing from a tree hugger, quite frankly. I think trees are good tree stands in so you can hunt deer from them. That's just that's the person I am. So when I'm alarmed about it, it has gone beyond all the tree huggers, etc. Now, deep well injection to me sounds like an utter horror, and I agree with Dane. I don't have the facts on it, but I can think of absolutely no way that injecting something like vaporizing it by sticking it into the ground, into the boulder zone, which is aggregate, therefore it's going to wander all over the place, is a good idea and or a solution. And I think Sawyer's point is well taken, is that the water needs to go south. The idea of destroying fresh water or treatable water by blasting it into the ground to disappear to God knows where is a bad idea unless we know that it's a good idea. It's not worth the risk, because good luck trying to get that back out again.
Thank you. And I think to that point, you know, the emergency injection wells, the emergency estuary wells, that water's gone. Right?
Yes, and I won't disagree. Obviously, that's exactly what we're saying, is where is this water going and is it safe? If we want to send it south, and we do, it's going to take at least 10 years to get the southern reservoir online. So the question is, do we want to deal with this for the next 10 years? Or do we look to immediate solutions and find a way? I'm not saying it's deep well injections. I'm saying all options should be on the table. And if we find a safe, reasonable manner to do it, then let's do it and not deal with this for the next 10 years.
Quick follow-up? Quick?
Yeah, quick question. Does it all matter because the state has already admitted, including the federal level, they cannot meet the tribe's parts per billion standards? We're talking about all these fixes and sending water south.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't really matter when it comes to tribe standards being met.
So there are stakeholders south of the lake, right, in the Everglades, in the Big Cypress National Preserve. You know, a lot of these tribes, they also pull fresh water out of the lake for their drinking water, but you know, they won't let water stand on their land. They won't let, you know, some of the southern solutions come onto their land because it doesn't meet their requirements. And as sovereign nations, how does that impact this southern solution?
It's a work in progress, and like I said, it's going to take time. We've got the House, the Senate, and the governor has signed off. We funded our 50% share. We've got the White House and the U.S. House signing on, thank God. The state delegation sent a letter to Mitch McConnell yesterday urging him to hear it in the Senate. I saw Senator Rubio and Senator Nelson did a bipartisan letter to McConnell as well, asking him and the minority leader of the Senate, asking them to get it on. So yes, the southern reservoir is not a guarantee for the issues you mentioned as well. This is a work in progress. So to say that, hey, we're going to send this water south and finally get something done is a great concept. And yes, that is our goal for everybody and all the stakeholders involved. How long is it going to take? So I think that feeds into my point. What else can we do in the meantime? And all these projects that are on your map, by the way, are not the southern reservoir. There are other things that are going to work, but we need to look at a multifaceted solution to this multifaceted problem. All options should be on the table for this major puzzle piece of issues. And unless we want to deal with this year after year to completely say, I'm not looking at that, I think that's wrong. We need to look at it and study it and make sure it's scientifically there. Hey, If it comes back and it says deep well injection is the product of the devil, I'm not signing on. We're going to make sure that it's the right thing. It's going to protect our communities. If that water is going out to sea and it's happening naturally by going underground and it doesn't go overground and affect us, then we're losing that water no matter what. So why not send it below us rather than over us? And I'm saying that with the asterisk.
Sure.
What is the science behind it?
Sure. Thank you, sir. Thank you. So, Chris, the nasty R word, regulation. Do we need more to fix this problem, or do we need less?
Well, in general, my answer to anything with regulation is we need less.
Okay.
What we need from the federal level is the money that they've promised that will fix this problem. So that's our focus every day in Washington, is to get that money down here, to get the projects that are on the books built and doing their job.
Oh, that was nice and brief. Thank you. Awesome. Let's talk. Okay, so generally everybody, we wrap up around 8 o'clock. But if the panel is okay, Councilman Maughan, I know you have to get on the road. But if the panel's okay to stay over a little bit and you guys are enjoying this, I think we can keep going if that's okay with you all. Got a couple more questions? Okay, great. Okay, so, all right, Chris, so another follow-up question, if you could be brief. Where is the EPA in all this at the federal level? I know they were part of the meeting yesterday. The Congressman brought them down here. What are they saying about this?
Yeah, I mean, they have a role to play, certainly, and we need to make sure that they're involved in the immediate solutions right now. That's what we've got them focused on, is how do we get resources that help people today from Washington down here? How do we help people who have been affected? How do we help communities that have been affected? So we'll see what they say. As you said, they were just here yesterday, so we'll be expecting answers from them very soon. In the long term, in the big picture, it's more about, as I already said, getting the projects that are already there and ready to go funded so they can do their job.
Brief follow-up, ma'am?
Where has the EPA been? This is like unheard of for me. I can't imagine this. I see it, and I'm new here, I admit it, but where have they been?
And that's a fair.
I didn't mean to put you on the
No,
spot.
and that's a fair question. The Congressman's been in office for 18 months, and we often wonder where everybody has been over the last 18 years in getting this problem fixed.
Yes.
So, we're doing our best to get answers from them and every other agency that is in any way involved with fixing our water.
And I'll say I've been leading conference calls with DEP almost weekly to find answers and solutions and what more can we be doing. Our fertilizer ordinance is up to date, our breast management practices progress the way that everybody intended. So there's no question we need to take a second look at everything and try to figure out what more we can be doing. While we've been having our eye on the ball and focused on solutions, there's something else we got to be doing at the same time, and we're focused on that.
But you can't do it all, They can't.
It's fine. When you talk about the regulations, and I'm fully on board with the no more regulations, as I'm sure most of the people up here are, but it's like gun laws. Enforce the regulations that are in place now. There are waivers to the Clean Water Act that a certain industry receives. If you or I polluted the water adjacent to our land, as other people do in the central southern part of the state, we'd be arrested straight away. There'd be black helicopters over your house. And these are waivers that go back to the prior administration, and they need to be removed, because this will end in 2 shakes of a lamb's tail if nobody got a waiver from polluting water. So as far as I'm concerned, enforce the rules that we have now. They're on the books, exactly right. The same way with somebody who tries to buy a gun and they don't get cleared, well, look at it then. Don't just hand it out and say, well, we couldn't get it this week, but we won't worry about that one. These are the things that need to be, and the other thing is the president needs to be engaged. And we were lucky enough, and Anthony Farr back there, myself, got to meet with Donald Jr. a few weeks back, and we pressed that point exactly. We need to engage the president and explain to him this is something Republicans should own in the state of Florida. This is economies, families, communities. There is no reason we should be subsidizing some sort of socialist outfit in the middle of southern Florida.
With the southern solutions, with restoring natural water flow and getting more water to the glades, a big part of this problem, a big part of the water control system that's been established is because of the population on the east coast of Florida and the boom down there. So, but we're still seeing significant development there on the border of the Everglades, i.e. the world's newest mega mall right off Sawgrass that is approved. Miami has approved that, and it's Dade County Commissioners approved it, and it's going forward. So how does that impact this discussion?
It goes back to what I was saying earlier. We've got 6 million people that live where the Everglades used to be, and you couple that with the agricultural communities and everything, we're all a part of it. It's human consumption. Yes, these are all things we need to take a look at, and seconding what my panel colleagues up here have said, do we want to do more regulation? That's not something I've ever supported. Every bill that I've passed has to do with deregulation. However, when we look at this crucial point that we're in, I think everything deserves a second look. Do we need to build a mega mall in the Everglades? Probably not. Probably not. So yes, the fact that we will continue to grow, we're 21 million people. We're now the third largest state in the nation. We surpassed New York years ago. And frankly, it's because of our good policies. We're cutting taxes, we're cutting regulations. People are coming here in droves from tax and spend states like New York and Pennsylvania and Ohio. It's actually a curse of the blessing that we have created. And I think that there are ways to manage that. And I think that we're doing some of those things, and we need to continue to look at that and make sure that we're growing responsibly. Things are in place. And that, as we've said before, stewards are also looking out for themselves. Does anybody know that we're in a fertilizer ban right now?
Yes.
I mean, these are things that many people don't even realize. And while that might be a drop in the bucket, it's a part of the problem. I mean, these are all things we need to look within and say, are we doing the right things? Are we growing responsibly? Are we being responsible stewards? And going back to the question, I don't know that we need a mall in the Everglades, but
Good point. Okay, thank you. So, I know we're not scientists here. Which issue do we have the best odds of confronting head on right now to solve? Blue-green algae coming out of the lake and affecting our water, or red tide blooms offshore that come inshore and kill off everything?
I'll say one thing briefly and I'll pass it on. While we have the projects in place for long term and we're looking at the short term, the shorter terms, I'd say there's three. Immediate, let's clean up what's on the water, let's clean up the beaches and just continue to hope for the best, that God gives us grace and that the things clear up. Short term, 1 to 5 years, find other solutions, find ways that we can help fix that, and one of those is a Lake Okeechobee release schedule. Army Corps of Engineers, while they do a great job managing the flood system, they do a really great job managing the flood system and make sure that people south of the lake aren't flooded, and therefore we get that water. There is flexibility in the Lake Okeechobee release schedule. Rather than storing that water all winter long while it rains and letting that lake get high and then flooding us all at once when our ecosystem can't handle it in the rainy season, let's find ways to have some flexibility. Give us some of that water in the dry season when we need it. Our ecosystem can handle it then. It's when you do it all at once that there's a problem. They have indicated that they're open to flexibility. I know Congressman Rooney's working on it. It's something that the feds need to address. That is something we all in this room can do. Look, Congressman Rooney knows that that's the case, so don't bombard Chris with your emails, but maybe reach out to others, reach out to President Trump, reach out to other senators and House members. They've got to convince every other, all 535 members of Congress that this is something we need to do. And that is something that else we can do in the short term is help with that Lake Okeechobee release schedule. And then the long term is the projects that are in front of you.
Just to tag on to what Dane said, Colonel Kirk, who is the head of the Army Corps for the Jacksonville, this region that controls the dike, he and Congressman Rooney have met on the LORS issue, the Lake Okeechobee release schedule. And they've agreed that, and Congressman Rooney has got commitment from the Colonel that they will work to adjust that release schedule so that we do get better management of when those releases come, the lake level being lower, so through the winter when we can take the water, as Dane said, and it will reduce the need to do these releases during our rainy season when it has the worst impact to our environment. So it's something that Congressman Rooney is aware of, has talked to Colonel Kirk about at the Army Corps, and something that the Corps has committed to being able to work with us on.
So far.
I'm sorry. Listen, when we talk about causation, etc., it's universally agreed that excess nutrients either cause or inflame what we're dealing with. I always think of it as sort of a Hansel and Gretel thing, where Dane is completely right. Red tide's a naturally occurring event, but it's usually offshore. Like I think in '06 or when we were kids, it used to be after you had sort of a week or two of an onshore breeze, and it would go long enough in one direction to pull it all the way in. Well, we haven't had an onshore breeze that's run for several weeks. So the consensus is that when the Caloosahatchee pumps out and it's not at the corner of the Gulf Stream where it expedites and flies by the Panhandle and comes down, it comes out, it gets trapped in the bay behind the islands, things start to happen, and then we see the red tides appearing. And a red tide like this is extraordinary. It's off the charts. You know, listen, I'm a great believer in God helps those who help themselves. And when it gets to a point where he's poking you repeatedly in the eye and saying, you're doing this wrong, how many times do I have to keep saying this to you? There goes another summertime you didn't get to enjoy with your kids. Do something about it. Then we need to act, and act at an executive level. If, with a great deal of respect, if the legislative bodies won't drive this forward, then we need to look to our executives to do it. In the case of the governor's race, and I'm not plugging anybody, it's clear who I support and have since he was 20 points down and now isn't, but we've got to have representation on the water management districts. It's all ag people for the most part. We need to have riverine communities and the coastal communities represented, because the people in Clewiston are not suffering red tide and their fishing stocks aren't disappearing. And we're spending an exorbitant amount of money working on the dock, and dike, and I would want to do the same thing if I was living there. However, they haven't suffered since 1926, whereas we're suffering now on a biannual wipeout situation where most of the friends of mine who are fishermen are living in hell because nobody wants to go out, and when they can go out, the captains themselves can barely breathe. It's a nightmare. We've got to do something.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, and to that point, for those anglers in the room and those that enjoy going out and sport fishing, a 30-inch snook is 10 years old. 10 years old, and they're washing up on the beach. It takes a long time to recover that. A trophy tarpon, where we have people coming down here to fish those tournaments from all over the world, those are 20, 30-year-old fish that are white. So it is impactful. Dana, since you have the mic, what are some resources that are coming out now, if you know of any, or that are available to small businesses, employers, and stuff like that who are who are hurting right now because of this?
Well, right now the bridge loan is the first thing that's come out, but there's a large caveat attached to it. It's a 6-month loan, interest-free, but at the end of 6 months it has to be paid back in full. So it's really bridging people into season. But there's a lot of smaller businesses that can't take advantage of that. And the other thing is we don't know what the impacts of season are going to be this year. We know we're going to take a hit. We just don't know how big a hit. There's still some other resources that can be brought to the table, and I'm hoping it gets to that point. And it's probably going to have to, happen through Washington. I mean, this is a very large area that's being impacted. I mean, I hate to say it, but somewhere down the line we may have to look at this as a brownfield Superfund site because there's that much impact.
I like that idea. Hate to hear it, but
no, and nobody ever wants to go there. But the fact remains, if this is something that's recurring year after year or every 2 years and not going away, we need to get in front of it. And as Dane said, this is not a new issue. It's been around for a while. And now, it's getting exacerbated because you have red tide colliding with us, and it just, it's two fronts, like you said. But my big thing is, we got to look at this and get in front of it so people don't suffer. But unfortunately, over the long haul, people have an attitude of it's not a problem until it's a problem. But we're staring at the problem right now, and it has to be addressed very quickly. So I'm hoping that some of these resources get brought to the table. Representatives, the president, have been down, and I, seeing things firsthand, I think might really, light the fire that we need. And I'm hopeful that that will take place. But realistically, right now, the bridge loan is the only real source that's been identified thus far, but I'm hopeful that more will come down. And I don't know, Chris, maybe you could talk to that.
Sure. Sure. So what we did just a week or so, maybe 2 weeks ago, was Congressman Rooney sent a request to the White House to declare a disaster at the national level to go along with the state of emergency that the governor declared to get our area taken care of. To us, this is every bit as important and every bit as much a disaster as wildfires in California and flooding in Michigan. That request certainly got the attention of all of the federal agencies, which led us to get the attention that we got yesterday when we had all those agencies down here. So that was step 2, and now it's seeing what these agencies come back with, and we'll be putting the pressure on them to come back very quickly with some answers as to what we can do at the federal level. But I mean, it's just every bit as much a disaster as areas all over the country are facing, and we deserve to have that same treatment. I know that the League of Cities just passed a resolution, was it, today, that would call on all of the congressional leadership in Florida to urge the president to declare a disaster, and we're already out in front on that and have already done it.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you very much. So, to kind of wrap up, this was a great question that I just kind of want to wait till the end. What can we do as individuals when we leave this room tonight and we leave the meetings like so many others that we've been attending to hear this information? What can we do to spread the word, to be good stewards, to get to some kind of action to help?
I would say, well, the first thing is for your local leaders, your councilmen, your mayors, your county commissioners, your House and Senate members, Congressman Rooney, encourage them to be doing the right work. Maybe not an email that says, screw you, fix the problem now. We know, we're working on it. We wish it could be fixed now. Send them an encouraging email. That helps. It certainly helps. I appreciate what you're doing. Maybe look at this. Take a look at this. I've got an idea. Here's some other solutions. Here's something I was talking about with my neighbor. This could work. Next, look at your own fertilizer. Look at your lawns. Look, we just had Roundup. It's causing cancer. We've got fertilizers that are being put into our lawns that we've probably got some updates that need to take place. And these are things we need to look at. We seriously need to look at. Can we be doing something more organic with our lawns? What are better ways that we can look at this? Best management practices probably need a second look, and let's find out if they're being enforced correctly. And secondly, lastly, that Lake Okeechobee release schedule. I think that will give us some great flexibility. While we can continue to work for the long-term solutions, we can continue to look at ways to clean our water and clean our waterways. Having some flexibility with the time and the amount of water, fresh water that we get from Lake Okeechobee will be seriously helpful and help us heal our estuary. So if you can send Congressman Rooney an encouraging message to continue to work on LORS, and Senator Rubio and Senator Nelson and others, I think that is something that we can really strive to fix in the short term while we work on the long-term solutions.
Yeah, I think very simply, keep the pressure on. Keep bringing this up to your elected officials, to agencies, to people that you know. There's an election coming up. Make sure that as you research candidates, you ask them the tough questions of, what are you going to do to fix this? How are you going to play a role in solving our water problems? And don't just accept lip service and pat answers. Make sure that they can give you some details and solid plans and how they're going to take care of these issues. We're certainly going to do our part at the federal level. We appreciate the support that we hear from people when we work on these issues, because it helps that we're knowing the importance of it. We certainly do, but it's always encouraging to get that feedback from everyone back home as to, keep doing what you're doing. And if you know people in other states who have relationships with other representatives who can be helpful and be a sympathetic ear towards fixing our problem in terms of voting for us to get funding, if they're on appropriations, if they're part of the process in any way, put the pressure on. I know we've had a lot of congressmen, and we've actually compiled a list of congressmen that either have second homes down in Lee and Collier County or have relatives that are down here. Vice President Pence likes to vacation in Sanibel. He has a few times. So we are certainly making sure that that's on their radar. You just continue to keep the comments coming. We appreciate them.
I think, going back to what Dane said, be aware. We can do our part. There's the little things that we can do as homeowners and as community people to share the word, to keep things clean. Last 5 years, Cape Coral's been trying to work with Fort Myers to get them out of the rivers, and we take their wastewater and treat it and use it for irrigation. We have a state grant to do that. That's got to get done, because that's a lot of wastewater that goes into the river. And you might say, on a math basis, it's not a lot, but you know what? It sounds like every little bit is doing its part to hurt us. So we need to start somewhere, and things like that, and then building the awareness for everybody, and then, as Chris said, make sure we're sharing what's going on with our elected officials. We need to be that pesky voice in their ear to make sure that they're always going to stay on top of this.
I agree with the three gentlemen here wholeheartedly. Everything they've said is exactly it. I don't blame the Corps of Engineers. I don't care who wants to. They're soldiers and they do what they're told. And I expect them to. And whether I was standing in front of those lock gates or not, when it says do this, they open them up, and that's that. So we need to make sure that we put pressure on the people who give them the orders. That's our job as citizens.
There's other things that we can do.
There we go. Accelerating programs, I could go through a litany.